A few months ago, I got the bright idea to post an Instagram story asking people who follow my page to hit me up with any questions on grooves or fills that they'd like me to break down. My intention was to post little 30 to 60-second responses to everyone that reached out. And it started out wonderfully. I was getting questions like, break down your favorite drum groove, or how do you play the intro to Superstition? And then, as fate would have it, somebody had to rain on my parade. Yo man, can you break down the groove at the 6:35 mark of that song Eulogy by Tool? My heart sank instantly. I haven't listened to a lot of Tool, but I heard enough of it to know that Danny Carey was not a drummer to be trifled with. His drum parts are notoriously difficult to understand, let alone play. But I'm a man of my word, and mama didn't raise no wimp, so I had to take a stab at it. And I'm glad I did. I learned a ton doing it. This groove is deceptively slick, and it forced me to break it down piece by piece in order to get it under my hands. My goal in making this video is not to show you how to play a cool Danny Carey groove. My goal is to give you a framework, a system on how to approach and learn difficult material effectively. So with that being said, let's break it down. Hey, real quick, if you've ever wanted to play fills like this, or like this, you should download my free guide called Mastering Linear Drumming, where I break down the patterns that every drummer should know in order to get comfortable with linear drumming, and then I give you 15 of some of my favorite linear drum fills in order to help you get started. So if that's something you think you're interested in, click the link down below to get your free copy. All right, back to the video. All right, the first thing that you have to be able to do when learning something hard is to understand what you're trying to play. What is the time signature? What elements of the drum set are being played and what patterns are being played on each element? It's really important for drummers to develop an ear to hear and recognize each part of the drum kit and then to understand rhythms and subdivisions. As I've said before, music is like speaking a language. Somebody could be giving you the simplest of instructions, but if you don't understand the language that they're speaking, you won't catch on to what you're supposed to do. This groove in particular is played between the kick, the snare, and the hi-hat, with the kick being played on the 1, the E of 1, the and the of 2, and the E and the and of 3, and the snare is being played on the 2 and the 4. The hi-hat is where things start getting really funky though. Danny plays this one-handed 16th note pattern while opening up the hi-hat on the dotted 8th notes. All right, let's nerd out for a minute. Adding a dot to a note just means that you take the value of that note and add half to it. Let's think about it in terms of money. If I had a dotted $1 bill, I'd have $1 plus half of $1, which would be 50 cents. So in total, a dotted $1 bill would be equal to $1.50. So let's switch back to music. A dotted eighth note is the length of 1/8 note plus half of an eighth note, which would be a 16th. I personally like to think about dotted eighth notes in groups of threes. If we go back to our money analogy, we could think about that $1.50 as a dollar bill plus a 50-cent piece, or we can think about it as 3 50-cent pieces. Both equal the same amount. In the same way, instead of thinking about a dotted eighth note as lasting the length of an eighth note plus a 16th, I like to think of it as lasting for 3 16th notes. This is exactly what Danny Carey is doing in this groove. He's playing 16th notes on the hi-hat and is opening up the hi-hat on the dotted eighth note or on every third 16th note.
1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1.
This creates rhythmic tension because these accents go over the bar line. Most things we play are wrapped up in little neat one measure packages. We start on beat 1 and then we end safely on beat 1 of the next measure. With these accents on the dotted eighths, we're going to start on beat 1, but it's going to take 3 whole measures before we can get the accent to fall back on beat 1 again.
1 E and a 2
It's going to be really important that you practice this by itself for a while and make sure that you get comfortable with it before adding the kick and the snare drum in. Once you understand the elements of the groove, the next step is to divide and conquer. In other words, you want to break it down into manageable chunks. In this groove, the kick and the snare drum part are pretty straightforward. The challenge is going to be lining up those open hi-hat accents with the kick and the snare drum. Because this dotted eighth pattern on the hi-hat takes 3 measures to complete, the notes where the accents line up with the kick and the snare will be different for each measure. This can be really confusing and can take a little while to get comfortable with. So it's really important that you practice this groove measure by measure very slowly until you get comfortable with it. In the first measure, the open hi-hats line up with the kick drum on the 1, the and of 2, the E of 3, and then it lines up with the snare drum on beat 4. The second measure is a little weird because none of the open hi-hats line up with the kick or the snare. When you have the first and the second measure comfortable, practice transitioning between the two. In the last measure, the hi-hat lines up with the kick on the E of 1, the of 2, and the and of 3. And then it lines up with the snare drum on beat 2. When you're good with the third measure, add it into the mix and then slowly practice transitioning between all 3 measures. The final step is to overlearn the material. One of my favorite quotes of all times is that amateurs practice until they get it right, but professionals practice until they can't get it wrong. Danny Carey plays this groove around 92 beats per minute on the record. I believe that it's a good idea to be able to play any groove or feel faster than needed so that when you play it at the correct speed, it'll feel easy to you. Full disclaimer, I'm still working on this groove and getting it up to speed. At the time of this taping, I've worked it up to about 83 beats per minute. My goal is to get it between 95 and 100. If you're curious about my progress, go over to my Instagram page and follow me there, and I'll post updates periodically.